Hello and welcome to Good Morning UK Have Your Say, a Force for Good's mid-morning show coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConaughey. A very good morning to you. It's a great day here in Union City, Glasgow, and thanks to everybody who's coming in already. Good morning to Tommy. Always good to see Tommy from Newcastle, and Alan from Greenock, and James. I hope you're keeping well this morning, James, and Darren from Fife. Good to see you. Now, we have a packed programme today. At the top of the hour, we have our guest, Highland Pauline, is back after a popular demand. She'll be back to speak about what's been happening this week in Scottish politics. Good morning to you, Alan, and always good to see Richard in here, and Liz from Wishaw. Good morning to you, Liz. Hope you're keeping well. And good old Ryan there from the West Riding of Yorkshire. And Anne, good morning to you, Anne, from Blackpool. TC, always good to see you as well, TC. And Steve from Wellingborough, fantastic. That's a nice town. Now, today we are going to talk about this question. Here is my question to you, okay? Is the SNP trying to become the party of the mob? Okay, that's our question to you today. Send in your answers to that. Is the SNP trying to become the party of the mob? Because it seems like they are giving tacit approval to law breaking in Scotland at the moment. And that's, of course, a very dangerous and foolish path to try to tread, but of course anything is possible from the people who are unfortunately misgoverning us at the moment. So is the SNP trying to become the party of the mob, and what is that going to mean for it moving forward? Well, we've got a few ideas on that which we'll get to. All right, Thomas, good to see you, and Catherine, hope you are well, Catherine. And Sylvia from Lancashire. Ronald. Sandra's in Facebook jail for posting a screenshot. Uh-oh. Well, I hope she gets out in the next 24 hours. Hello, Liz. Absolutely yes, says Liz. The SNP's becoming a party of the mob, and Andrew believes the New World Order globalist puppets. Yes, says William also. And party... Frankie says hello. Jack says party of the Muppets. Good to see Mark from Sheffield. Alan says they're a party of division, and this is the ideal way to split the country and its people. Yes, that's the thing, you know, if you were elected essentially with 50% of the country for you and 50% of the people against you, the last thing you would do would be to try to heighten division in the land, because you'd realise that that's really quite a precarious situation, and you want to try to keep everybody in the big picture, and so you wouldn't be doing anything as divisive as the sorts of things that they've been getting up to at the moment, which we'll get on to in a minute. We've got our guest coming up at 11 o'clock. That's Highland Pauline, so please do stick around for Highland Pauline, who's always got a lot to say. Andrew says they're playing from a Marxist playbook. And Humza Yousaf is absolutely useless. Pauline, who's going to be joining us, says mob rule is scary, the power of the bullies, we must not be their victims. Once again, says Tommy, the SNP don't fail to disappoint, picking on a football club and its support only because they are predominantly Unionist. We'll get to that in a moment. They don't complain of other gatherings. And Richard wonders if they're getting more desperate in their tactics as time is going on. They didn't get their majority. That's true. They did not get their majority, even though, as you say, they manipulated the franchise. They gave basically everybody the vote. You just have to be resident now in the United Kingdom to get the vote. Resident in Scotland to get the vote here. Basically, okay, there's one or two exceptions, but it used to be based on citizenship, but the SNP were given the franchise. They were devolved the franchise, which was absurd, unbelievable stupidity by the British government, devolving the franchise to the SNP. I mean, what did they think they were going to do with that? Of course they're going to gerrymander it for their own purposes. Absolutely appalling behaviour by the British government, just showing that it doesn't understand how the country's held together. Anyway, that aside, we're stuck with what we've got. They're happy to split Britain, says Jack. Yeah, I know what you mean. And Raymond has a poor impression of the SNP, believing they're rotten to the core. They're certainly very divisive to the core, that's for sure. Stephen says the SNP have an agenda of anarchy, mob rule, and will do anything to keep Scotland on edge. It fits the narrative of divisive politics. Because, as many of you know, what happened last Thursday the 13th, the Home Office, which is the British government, were removing a couple of overstayers, people who were not entitled to stay in the country, and they had to essentially send a van round to pick these guys up. Now, that's not normal practice, because what would normally happen is you get a letter from the Home Office to turn yourself in to the authorities, and most people, virtually all people, will turn themselves in when they get the letter, and especially if they're advised by their lawyer that we've exhausted all the possibilities, so what you have to do now is just turn up at the authorities and hand yourself in, and you'll be taken to the detention centre, and then you'll be removed from the country. And that's what happens in most cases. But if you're advised by your lawyer, as possibly these people were, just to sit tight and don't do anything and let's create a scene here, then what has to happen is that the enforcement van has to come round, chap your door, and take you away on the street. And so make no mistake, these two people these two people knew what was coming, okay? Because they will have had multiple letters to hand themselves in peacefully and without a fuss, but they chose not to. They chose to create a scene. So that's what then happened. Now, as we've written earlier, there's nowhere else, basically, in Scotland where they could have pulled off that stunt, which they pulled off in Kenmure Street, because Kenmure Street is a perfect mix of largely students who at this stage are not even in college because of the COVID lockdown, so they're all hanging about, got nothing to do, and it's a certain type of student as well that stays there. And of course there's also a perfect mix of SNP councillors who run that area, and also various ethnic minorities as well, often just getting on with their own business. So it's a very unusual area, that Govanhill, which is Nicola Sturgeon's constituency as well, which might also be a factor here. So it's a perfect mix where you could possibly do what they managed to do on Thursday last. There's not really any other areas in Scotland outside of a big city like Glasgow or perhaps Edinburgh where you could pull a stunt like that off. But the SNP managed to pull that stunt off, and of course they were delighted to do so, and they prevented two people who needed to go back to wherever it was that they were told they had to return to. They prevented them from being taken away at this moment. Now, what that did, of course, was it set a very, very bad precedent. Now, Brian says, why didn't they just turn up in a plane car to remove these people. That's a good point. I don't understand that as well. Why do they have to make a song and dance about it? Turning up with a van that says, immigration enforcement and all that kind of stuff. I'm not clear. You'd think there could be less less obtrusive methods of doing that, wouldn't you? Hello to Amber. How are you from Bath? So basically they turned up, and it would be known that they were turning up at that time, okay, because the lawyers would know, and the lawyers would be able to tip off whoever they wanted to tip off if they chose to do so. They could have done that. I'm not saying that they did that, but they would be aware that something was going to be happening to these people within a certain frame of time. And so basically what you had was all the usual suspects pictured there, okay? All the usual SNP councillors that we see at all these events, all the usual so-called human rights lawyers that we see at these events, all the local political activists that we see at all of these events. And, we've been watching these people for at least 25 years, okay, when all this started to come together, when large numbers of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees were coming into Glasgow. But 25 years ago, a whole network was established, and it's the same people who were doing their thing back then who are doing their thing now. I won't obviously mention any names, but this is the same names, the same organisations still around, and they've all made very well-paid careers for themselves in the endless immigration and asylum and human rights industry which exists in Scotland. I did law as a mature student back in the early 2000s, and I realised that if you got into immigration law or so-called human rights law, it was an absolute bottomless pit of money, because you have clients arriving at your door every single day in streams, in droves, in lines of people. I mean, if you're servicing the immigration and asylum industry, you will make a mint, because it's like endless clients who are just coming in every day, and they're all your wages are being paid for by the great British taxpayer, of course. So, because it's like all on legal aid and things like that. So it's just it's an absolute sinecure. That's the word I'm looking for. If you can become a human rights lawyer in Scotland, sinecure, you have endless clients. Anyway, so these people done very well for themselves in that industry, the immigration industry. And it was all them. It was all these people there. And, of course, they were able to, because of that area, they were able to get a group of people together to make a song and dance about what was going on. But what was most disturbing was the reaction of both Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf. Now, Nicola Sturgeon put out a tweet, and she said, well, she put out several tweets that day, given us the misfortune of her opinion. And she said that the deeper problem here is, quote, an appalling asylum and immigration policy. Now, of course, asylum and immigration is set by the British Home Office. And as somebody was commenting to me earlier, it has to be one of the most lenient immigration and asylum policies in the world. I mean, Britain is a soft touch when it comes to immigration and asylum. I mean, far too soft. It's incredibly soft. I mean, it's wet lettuce soft on immigration and asylum. But to listen to Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, you'd think this was like 1930s Germany or something like that. But literally, it's wet lettuce soft on immigration and asylum. The United Kingdom is, and that's why people are arriving every day, hundreds a week in rubber dinghies across the English Channel. If Britain was hard on immigration and asylum, as arguably it should be a lot harder, these people wouldn't be arriving in these little boats, okay? The fact that they're actually being ferried across the channel, essentially by the border ferry, as we call them, not the border force, the border ferry. They're being ferried into the country by the border ferry. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. Britain is wet lettuce soft on immigration and asylum. And so there's no appalling immigration and asylum policy, to quote Nicola Sturgeon's words, although some people argue it should certainly be a lot harder than it is. So we're very, very lenient. So straight away she's talking nonsense, talking utter rubbish. But she's trying to set up a distinction between Scotland, the land of unlimited tolerance and open borders, and she's trying to set up a distinction between what she wants Scotland to be like and what she imagines the United Kingdom is like, which is some sort of harsh regime. And then, of course, Humza Yousaf wades in as well. Well, she went on with another tweet and she said, "The day when immigration policy is the responsibility of the Scottish Parliament can't come soon enough." Well, we'll get to what the consequences of that would be and how, in fact, what she's just done this last week probably means immigration and asylum will never be devolved to Scotland, thank goodness. But she obviously wants that to come to Scotland. And Humza Yousaf waded in as well with his thoughts. And he did a video and he put it out and he said, quote, "Let me be clear. The hostile environment," whatever he means by that, "created by the UK government is not welcome here. Is not welcome here." In other words, British immigration policy, such as it is not welcome in Scotland. And so this is the so-called Justice Minister who's responsible for laws in Scotland, saying that British laws, the British Home Office laws on immigration and asylum, are not welcome here. What an inflammatory as well as downright ignorant thing for him to say publicly. So we responded on Twitter and we said the Justice Minister is basically saying that UK law is not welcome in Scotland, thereby implying we should not obey these laws and only obey laws created by himself and the Scottish Parliament. Dangerous and unacceptable messaging from someone in his position of responsibility. And, you know, we were talking earlier about how divisive the SNP is. That's the Justice Minister. The Justice Minister has to be so careful not to alienate vast elements of the population. You have to be diplomatic about these things. You can't be saying that UK law essentially is not welcome in Scotland. That's a sort of thing like a student would do, a 20-year-old student or something at some student union rally on the matter. I mean, that's not the diplomatic attitude of a Justice Secretary in the United Kingdom. That's utterly wrong for him to have said those things. So what's all this meaning? What it's meaning is it's giving the green light. The SNP is giving the green light to what happened. It's not standing there and going, yes, go on yourself, more mobs. But it's given the green light to it. It's not condemning it. He should have said, look, whatever you may think about immigration and asylum, the Home Office have got a job to do. So long as we're part of the United Kingdom, you have to let them do their job, because it's my responsibility as Justice Secretary to ensure that all laws here in Scotland are properly enforced. You know, he could have done that and we'd have all gone, well, yeah, you know, that's fair enough. But no, he has to really choose a side and come out strongly against British law being enforced, which is to come out strongly against everybody who believes that British law on these matters should still be enforced in Scotland. So extremely dangerous and unacceptable messaging from someone in his position of responsibility. So what that has done, of course, is it has given the green light to the Scottish nationalists, and they're kind of almost like, getting awfully excited. I was going to use a crudity there about how excited they are, but I'm not going to. But they are that excited. Some person who gets to write thousands of words in the Sunday National on Sunday was saying that the idea of spontaneous, peaceful, direct action is an example of radical, they love that word, radical self-organisation. It's a model for a new second phase of the independence movement. All right, okay, great. So you've excited all these borderline fruitcakes who write for the Sunday Herald into thinking now that this sort of behaviour is now a tactic to create Scottish independence. Well done, Humza Yousaf. Maybe that was your plan from the very beginning. However, here's a message of hope, okay? That attitude, that sort of law-breaking mob rule, if you want to call it that, attitude, is not going to appeal to Middle Scotland, okay? Middle Scotland, that vast swathe of normal people that you will have to appeal to if you want to win your argument one way or the other. So Middle Scotland is not impressed by confrontations with the police, okay? So if your plan now is to devise confrontations with the police in order to get your way, then I'm afraid that's not going to appeal to Middle Scotland. And you will, if you want to go down the route of being the party of the mob, then you're not going to appeal to Middle Scotland when it comes to the crunch, when it comes to the vote at the end of the day. So in that way, he's made a bit of a fool of himself. And another 2 points that have come out of this is that so long as Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, which it shall always be, but what it means is if we have the SNP or any of their sympathisers in charge, then we simply cannot devolve immigration and asylum to the SNP, because what it would mean is that given those powers, it will exercise them in an open border manner. It will exercise them in a way in which it's not prepared to enforce laws. So you can't devolve immigration and asylum to the Scottish Parliament. Not now, because we have a Justice Secretary who believes that the laws that we have on immigration and asylum are not welcome. It will mean that he's only going to enforce open borders, which means that you can't have that within the United Kingdom. It's like they've really messed up on that, because people denied entry to England will simply enter via Scotland's regime, and then they'll enter England that way. Or those who are threatened of removal from England will simply just move up to Scotland, where they're not going to get removed. So within the United Kingdom, you can't be devolving asylum and immigration to the SNP. And what it also means is that if there were to be an independent Scotland, then a hard border would be necessary, because the difference between the SNP's regime and that which exists in the rest of what remained of the United Kingdom would be so different. There'd have to be a hard border between Scotland and the rest of the UK, because Scotland would be effectively open to the entire world. Scotland would be effectively open to the entire world, because that appears to be what Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon want. Because they are essentially open border enthusiasts. Now, so the question which must be asked of them, and we're going to have our guest at 11 o'clock, so I'm just going to wind this up, but the question which must be asked is Do you, Humza Yousaf, do you, Nicola Sturgeon, do you believe in border control at all? Our MSPs must be asking these people these questions, because if you believe that Scotland has borders which need to be controlled, then you believe that they must be policed, and you believe that those laws must be enforced. And if you believe those things, then you have to support the actions of the Home Office whenever the Home Office removes people from the country, because it's simply enforcing the immigration laws. So they must be put on the spot. Yousaf and Sturgeon must be put on the spot. Do you believe in borders at all? Or are you just like this open borders internationalist? Because if that's what you are, then you have to level with us and tell us that. But if you do believe that borders need to be controlled, then you must believe that there will be laws, that these laws will be policed, and that these laws will be enforced. The only world in which the actions of the Home Office in Scotland are not welcome, to use Humza Yousaf's phrase, is a world where there are no border controls whatsoever in Scotland, and everyone accepts that it's just a free-for-all. And if that's what Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf want to see, then they need to level with us and they need to tell us that. Now, we've got our guest coming up at 11 o'clock. I wrote an article on the moral principles behind immigration control, because immigration is an issue which can trip everybody up, and so it's important to be working from a set of moral principles. And many years ago, 20 years ago, I wrote an article, The Moral Principles for a Sustainable Immigration Programme, and I revised it a couple of years ago, and it's on a Force for Good's website, and we'll put that up there, the link up there. But it demonstrates to the world the moral principles from which I'm working from, and from which a government that wants to stay clean on this matter should be working from as well. And borders are moral, and they are correct, and they need to be enforced, mate. They need to be enforced. And if you want to stay here, then if you've been here for several years, then become a British citizen, you know, and then you'll have the perfect right to stay here, regardless of who you are. Anyway, we've got our competition. I haven't forgotten the competition. That's coming up. Now, on this day in British history was the day when James VI proclaimed that both kingdoms of Scotland and England were united, because it was on the 24th of March 1603 that the Union of Crowns came together, that James the 6th of Scotland became the King of England, and thus the 6th James of Great Britain. And in order to consolidate that concept, he issued a proclamation on this day, the 19th of May in 1603, to state his desire to unite both the kingdoms of Scotland and England. That as His Majesty has found in the hearts of all the best disposed subjects a most earnest desire that the said happy union should be perfected, the memory of all past discontentments abolished, and the inhabitants of both the realms to be the subjects of one kingdom, so His Highness will with all convenient diligence make the same to be perfected. Lovely stuff. We'll put up his proclamation on our Facebook page, and we'll also ask the question for the competition, which is a fairly easy one, and it's for this tin of mints, of quality mints. Lovely embossed tin here with the Union Jack and a London bus. And the question is, in what year was the Union of the Crowns? And send that answer in, folks. Send it in to our email, which is contact at aforceforgood.uk. Send in your answer to the question, in what year was the Union of the Crowns? For it was on this day, in 16th of May, that James VI proclaimed the kingdoms of Scotland and England to be united in one. Now, I see our guest, Highland Pauline, is in the waiting room, and I'm going to bring in Pauline right now. Good morning, Pauline.
Hi.
Hi. How are you this fine morning?
Absolutely fine, Alistair. Just enjoying your chat there. Very interesting.
Good. Everything's all right, I can see from your top.
Yeah. Well, almost all right.
Yeah. Well, we've always got to keep optimistic, because without that, we're doomed. So we always try to give a positive message, not just doom and gloom, but trying to give an answer as well to things. And you're good at that as well, because you've been on before. You're back due to popular demand, and you on your Facebook page will regularly, well, almost every day now, look at issues to do with the news and give your considered opinion on it. Now, let's start, because you're thinking on these matters all the time. Let's start with your thoughts on the result of the Scottish election last week, and what you think that it might bode for us in the coming months and years.
Okay, well, I think the result, initially when you're watching it, you become depressed, because you realise that there are so many people voting for the SNP, and you're at a loss of words, and you do feel like weeping. But then when it's all over and you have a look at it, it became quite obvious that really nothing has changed. One seat more, which is actually quite poor when you consider all the work done, all the television coverage, all the money that the SNP were able to throw at it, their clever manoeuvring, the people they have in place. Considering all these things, they perhaps should have really walked it. They should have walked it. And I think that's what we were scared about. And they didn't walk it. There's really not much change. And when you look at the actual votes, more people voted for Unionist parties still than voted for separation. So all in all, it was a bit same old, I would say. But we seem to be stuck in the mud now. We're not moving particularly forward, and we're not moving particularly back. And I just think that we need to bust this situation that we're in. We need to be more proactive, and we need to do something to force the hand. And I think that general election has really just shown us that, if we're going to change things, we've got to make changes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I concur with your thoughts on that. We had a guest last week who came up with the phrase that the SNP are treading water. And that seems to be the case. It's almost as if they've reached their high water mark, and they will have been disappointed with that result. But it is disappointing that so many people are still voting for the SNP, because, you made the point here in one of your articles which you put on Facebook. I'll just read it here. You said, "Our rock and our stability has come from being part of the most successful union in the world, but that is another thing Nicola won't mention either. How many of the nationalist voters happily took the furlough money, the business grants, and refused to acknowledge where it came from?" Well, that's true. The amount of money that's been getting pumped in directly into people's pockets from the British Treasury. It's literally, they go onto, you can go onto the internet, you click a few buttons on the HMRC website, and literally up to, depends how much you're owed, of course, but up to 7,000 or 8,000 can be coming into your pocket just like that, you know. And that's the largesse of the British government. But yet, has that not been appreciated?
Well, that's the other thing. You know, I have said that the SNP didn't do particularly well in the general election, all things considered. But, you know, you could turn it around and say, well, all things considered, look what the UK has done for Scotland over the recent pandemic and continues to do. That should have also had a massive effect. So there's a kind of a balancing act going on here. But I do think that, you know, we are looking at this kind of brave heart element in Scotland, as has been said many times before, which is ridiculous. I also think there's a lot of, I would say you may be describing as middle ground SNP voters who don't want independence, of course. They know which side their bread's buttered on, but they are keen to be seen as truly Scottish and be promoted as true Scots, which is fine. But they shouldn't really be voting SNP then. But I just think that the general election has maybe woken us up to the fact that we're not making the progress we thought we would make in 2014. I think when the results came in 2014, we thought, right, that's it. Push a little bit more. Let's relegate the SNP to a minority party. Let's get back to proper politics in Scotland. And that just didn't happen. And, you know, we're just going round and round in circles at the moment. This, if I can talk about this Kenmure Street carry on, I mean, that was absolutely ridiculous. That's unbelievable. And I've questioned although I have no high regard for Nicola Sturgeon or Humza Yousaf, to put it mildly, I have to ask why they would do that, because they're not entirely stupid. And I've decided that maybe there is a darker side to it. Are they trying to make Scotland so unappealing to the rest of the UK that, in fact, the rest of the UK will do the job for them and get shot of them? And I'm actually thinking, you know, I've seen comments recently from English people saying, well, you know, if Scotland's going to let all these immigrants in without borders, if they're going to flood their country, we don't want them here, we'll have to build a wall. And I'm wondering if that was the reason they took the gamble to do this, because they actually are trying to make Scotland look so unattractive to the rest of the UK that the UK wants shot of them and the UK will do the job for them, because they're not managing to do it themselves. I just think there must be some underlying reason, and everything the nationalists do has a darker side to it. And I'm just wondering, it'd be interesting to know if people think that is perhaps the case, but certainly it was news all over the England. People were shocked and actually quite horrified that Scotland now can have many illegal immigrants who we don't know who they are, and they can just get in their car and they can arrive in London or Manchester, and I think it's been a bit of a wake-up call in that respect. So it's a very, very tricky situation, and I think there's more to it than first meets the eye, really.
That's a fascinating angle, the extent to which the SNP really will deliberately bring the tempo down upon their own heads in that way, and even if it means destroying Scotland or making Scotland look really, really bad, if it's enough to just create turmoil in the rest of the United Kingdom and upset enough people elsewhere, that's possible. And I read the National every day, and believe me, there are letter writers and commentators in that who can't really hide their glee about the fact that the relationships between Scotland and England are apparently getting worse. You know, they see that as a good thing.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, of course they do. I mean, it's really about, if they can't take themselves out of the United Kingdom, then they would like to alienate Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom. And this immigration thing is a perfect tool for them. I can't think that Sturgeon is as stupid as to make herself look so immoral and so so against the law that she would do this unless there was another undercurrent going on. And how do we turn around to our friends in the rest of the United Kingdom and say, hang on a minute, the majority of Scots want to stay with you. Please don't, take this as being who we are. We're not rogues. We're not lawbreakers. But if she wants to alienate us, well, this would be a very good way to do it.
Yes, that's right. They're going to constantly use this angle, I think, now in some way or another, and just encourage this sort of this attitude that's going on. And I mean, it's not. It has serious economic consequences for Scotland as well. And I talked about bringing the tempo down upon themselves. Economically, they could really damage Scotland in this way. I mean, one of Scotland's great exports is, of course, tourism, because we happen to be blessed here in a country with beautiful scenery and amazing history. And the world wants to come usually to Scotland, but of course so do everybody else in the rest of the United Kingdom usually want to come to Scotland. And what's your thoughts on the danger of that breaking down as well?
Well, I mean, it is breaking down. As a holiday cottage owner, just a wee small place we have, many of our guests the last few years have come from England and love Scotland and repeat bookings. And but now there's things like, now, first of all, the bookings are seriously affected. We thought we'd have staycations after COVID, and we thought we'd be flooded with people from England and Wales and perhaps Ireland, and we really were looking for bookings, and they're just not happening. And I cast my eye around, and it's the same everywhere. Certainly up here in the Highlands, there's so much empty space. There's not the hordes coming up. And it's quite interesting to note, I have a friend who has a holiday home in Dorset, and she is inundated with English people. I think a lot of English people are holidaying in England. They're not even crossing the border. They've seen the stories of people standing at the border with placards, English go home, people throwing eggs at cars that passed, actually spitting at cars. They've heard Nicola Sturgeon talk about closing a border repeatedly, about English people not being welcome. She is single-handedly damaging one of the last remaining industries, good industries that Scotland had. It was also not only a good industry, it was a growing one. We have fabulous scenery. Everybody wants to come here. We used to be seen as a very welcoming country, but I'm afraid that has been completely damaged. And people from England are actually choosing to stay and holiday in England now. So, we'll manage, but a lot of small businesses, a lot of tourist outlets, they need that money, and they're just not going to get it. And you would have thought that the Scottish government that cares about its people, that wants it to be safe and secure and successful, would be encouraging our neighbours to come. But there's certainly no encouragement. It's really a really gloomy picture in tourism here.
Totally. And even just the way that Sturgeon handles the COVID thing, she could have still been much more welcoming, but she ends up messaging basically, if you're English, stay away, and she could have found other ways of putting that in order not to emphasise a certain sort of foreignness in her tone when she describes people from the rest of the United Kingdom. But no, she's been absolutely terrible at this, and I am concerned about that, because one of the ways that Britain stays together is by people from all parts of a very small island group, basically intermingling, going to English people going to university or college in Scotland and vice versa. I'd like to see the statistics on that as well, because I think there was more of that going on in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But after devolution and the changing funding mechanisms and so on, my feeling is that there's been fewer English people coming to university in Scotland, which again means fewer relationships developing, fewer marriages, fewer mixed marriages between Scots and English, and so on, which also has an effect upon Britishness overall. And travel and tourism are ways in which the British Isles have become connected over time, especially in the last 100 years. And,
absolutely.
And that's what has created our shared social and cultural Britishness. And anything that affects that has political consequences in the long term.
Well, that's really, in a way, the point I was making almost about the Kenmure Road protests, about Scotland literally trying to alienate itself. It's really, perhaps that same thread runs through tourism and the English border, and all this. These English people have COVID when Scotland's rates were higher per thousand than England, and it's a constant alienation of Scotland. And we used to call it separation, making us look Scottish, making us look different. But that's not really worked now. So it's a harder line now. It's a harder line, If the English don't like us, then that's fine. They'll let us go. Maybe the English will even want us to go. I've had some family I have in the South Coast that say, they love Scotland, but lots of people say if Scotland want to go, then let them go. There's this one voice, and that's our problem, the one voice of nationalism, which overrides all us down-to-earth, hard-working unionists. We're overridden. Our voice isn't heard down south. And somebody asked a question today on a Facebook page, how do we tell the people in England that there are more of us that love the United Kingdom, that want our English friends to come to Scotland? And the only answer to that is we have to get lines into all the newspapers and the television channels. And how do we do that? Unfortunately, our opposition is resting on its laurels as usual. And it's all quite scary, Alistair. It is all quite scary.
It is, but I think you nailed it there when you said that it's almost like they're moving to a second phase here, that what hasn't worked so far, well, what we can maybe do is actually just deliberately create division.
Yes.
And of course, when they upset people in England, English people will fire back with something, and then the SNP will go, look, I told you they don't like us.
Yes, exactly.
It's a self-perpetuating process, if you see what I mean. Yeah. Sue has got a question here for you. She says, you must know others in the industry. I've looked at prices in Ballater and Aviemore, and they are really high, so she didn't book. Are these exceptions, or do you just think high charges are needed to recoup money after being closed?
Yeah, I think that sometimes the prices are high. Scotland has never been a cheap place to holiday anyway. You could book into a cheap B&B, but then you've got to buy your dinner, and it's always been a bit on the pricey side. But people have sort of accepted that because everything else was so good. But I think people notice the prices more if it's less attractive, which it is. I think you could call it greed, but I think it's not really greed. I think it's desperation. Although lots of places have been lucky enough to have the furlough money coming in, but I do think that prices. I mean, we ourselves have we were keeping to the same rates that we had last year and the previous year, but we've actually reduced now quite considerably. And there are a few more bookings, albeit from Scots people, very few from English people. But so price is an issue. But like everything, it's not just one issue. It's not just the price. It's the whole package, really.
Yes. No, that's a good point. Very good points there. Pauline, you're extremely eloquent on these matters, and given us a good thing to think about there, the rather sinister possibility that much of this, whether it's Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon carrying on with the Kenmure Street situation, or whether it's them speaking about English tourists, to what extent is this being done deliberately in order to create conflict ultimately? political conflict between Scotland and England, and it's a very good point, which we should not dismiss.
And can I just say one more thing? I really think, therefore, it's quite important that unless Westminster step up and take control of the situation, it's only going to get worse. It's going downhill fast. It's critical now. We need Westminster to stop being so friendly and conciliatory. We want them to say, no, that's not acceptable. We're not having that. This is what we're doing. They need to put Sturgeon in her place firmly and publicly, and they need to take control. They could do that. I know there are restraints because of the Scotland Act, but there are ways around it, and it's time they did it. And I'm really, really angry that they haven't stepped up to the mark yet. But what can I do?
Well, what you can do is what you are doing, which is making these points very clear and getting these points out there and getting them seen and heard by lots of people. And I agree entirely with that. Somebody else was saying to me, Priti Patel needs to stand up and go, look, I'm the Home Secretary. These are British laws. We're part of the United Kingdom. There's a hierarchy of laws here. British law is as relevant in fact, it's the more relevant than the Scottish parliamentary laws, because they only exist as a consequence of the British parliamentary laws under devolution. You know, it's a hierarchical structure, and you cannot. You have to stay in your place. Basically, Humza Yousaf. You know, he needs to be, as you just said, they're put in their place, and so many people would cheer in Scotland if she did that. You know, the Nats would have a conniption fit, but the rest of us would go, yes, somebody said it at last, and it would sort of break the ice, as it were, and it would put us back where we knew where everything was, because right now everything is just like kind of going to the wind. But things will get better. Things will get better, but what's needed is what we're doing, which is pointing out the problem. Because once you've pointed out the problem, then the solution can become a lot clearer after that.
Absolutely,
so
awareness.
That's what you're doing every day on your Facebook page, and that's what we're doing here at AFFG. So thank you very much, Pauline, for being our guest. Lots of positive comments coming in there for your well produced thoughts.
Well, thank
Ronald
you.
Says, absolutely, Pauline, action now. So on that note, I'll say goodbye, and we'll have you back on again sometime, Pauline.
Thanks so much, Alistair. Keep up your good work.
Will do. Cheers now.
Bye.
Fantastic. That's Pauline, who is a real star in the Unionist firmament. So Frankie says, excellent, Pauline, well said. Tommy says, hear, hear, Pauline, that's my opinion. Get it to them. Margaret says, wise words, Pauline. And Alan says, excellent guest, thumbs up there. Tommy says, great guest as always. Glad you enjoy the guests, Tommy. And Richard says, thank you, Pauline. So, fantastic. If you would like to appear on the show, if you've got something to say, please do contact me, and we can talk about it. And if you know people who might want to appear on the show, please also do suggest them as well, and we'll think about contacting them, because there's a lot of good people out there. And as we were just saying there to Pauline, we need to be heard, because we have to build our communication structures in whatever way that we can, because people like ourselves are not going to be getting invited onto Question Time or Newsnight or Good Morning Scotland or whatever the programmes are that you hear the same old voices on. You know, we are the grassroots unionism. Our voice needs to be heard, and the only way that we do that is by building our own communication structures, and we here at A Force for Good have been trying to do that now for 9 and a bit years. So please do support us if you can. Now, somebody asked, what's that t-shirt that you're wearing, Alice? This is just a basic A Force for Good t-shirt, and we have a range of these t-shirts with slogans are bestsellers, as Scottish and British. They come in a variety of colours, and they come in all sizes. So we'll put up the link there to our t-shirt and hoodie store, and we sell quite a few every week on our store, so please do check that out, because merchandise is a way of helping us to continue to exist, because we exist month to month, and especially we depend month to month upon those who donate month to month. And we have what we call our Union Supporters Programme, which is people who are donating up to, well, from £5 a week upwards. Now, £5 a week worked out over 52 weeks is £1.15 a week. That's £5 a month. So many people find that they're able to make that contribution. So if you can help us to support us monthly, please do become a Union supporter. Now, if you become a Union supporter, you will get a copy of our well, do you know what? I can't reach it. I thought it was closer to me. But our magazine, Union Heart, you'll get free copies of that. You'll get all the back issues to it. You'll also get our wee badge, our wee Union Heart badge, okay, which is free to our Union supporters if they request it. Otherwise, you can purchase our Union Heart badge from our website shop, but that's worth a £5. Very nice wee badge as well. You'll get that, and you'll also get a free. You also get an invite to our Union Social, which is the Unionist event of the year, when that's able to happen again, when Madam Sturgeon allows people to meet inside. Tommy says, buy the wee book. Again, the wee book is an important thing. Here it is here, a wee book for the Union. It's a great wee read, and if you buy that, or if you buy any of our merchandise, or if you become a Union supporter, what you're also going to be doing is enabling us to produce another 2 publications which we have planned. Another 2 slightly larger publications, but like bang-on publications that we need to get published as soon as. But I'll keep my powder dry about what they're going to be called. But they're going to be 2 more publications that are going to be very, very important for the Unionist cause. But you can get that wee book for the Union again in our online shop. So the competition. Who has won the competition? Now, the competition was for this box of luxury mints, tin embossed, beautiful box of luxury mints. And the question was a straightforward question. It was, in what year was the Union of the Crowns? And as always, quite a few people got it. But somebody was able to send in and we have a winner, because we asked him what year was the Union of the Crowns, and the answer is 1603, and the winner is Jeff Baker. Congratulations to you, Jeff. This little tin of luxury mints will be winging its way to you this afternoon. If please, what you could do is, using that same email, if you could send us your address for us to get this in the mail to you. congratulations to Jeff Baker, who came up with the right answer, which is the Union of the Crowns was in 1603. Brilliant, brilliant. Debbie says, congratulations, Jeff. Stephen says, well done, Jeff. Tommy says, congrats, Jeff. Bill says, great, Jeff. Fresh Unionist breath. And Sue says, congratulations, Jeff. Colin says, can you become a monthly union supporter by PayPal? Yes, you can. Now, I'll just put up for you, Jeff, the link that you can become, that you can use to pay by PayPal. If you go to it's aforceforgood.uk/other-payment-methods. Now, I thought I had the link ready to go there. I don't, but I'm just going to put it up now. Gosh, prior preparation, eh? forceforgood.uk/other-payment-methods. If you go to that link, then there's a button for PayPal, there's several go cardless links, there's also how to get in touch with us if you want to make a bank transfer, and there's also the address and so on if you want to make a payment by check. So it's all on that page, other payment methods. Bill. Colin. Stephen says, what's coming up? Is there any more rallies? There is an AUOB rally on Saturday outside Holyrood, but we made the decision not to attend that one. We don't think that it's worth our time and effort, that particular one. But anybody who wants to know what's coming up, do stick with us. Do go to that link, forceforgood.uk/support, and if you're on that, if you've give us your name and email, then we will ensure that you're kept up to date with anything that's going on. Okay, folks, running a little bit over time by a couple of minutes, but that's all good. Just to say, we'll be back next Wednesday at the same time, 10:30 in the morning. Please share this material around the internet. That was a good program that we had today. Great guest. Please do tune in next week. Please do share the stuff. Tommy says, another good show. Thank you, Tommy. Glad you enjoyed it, and hopefully see you next week as well. So it just remains for me to say, folks, God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen. See you next week.